Lily never expected that stopping on the side of the road would change her life. It was supposed to be just another late night, another exhausting shift, another long drive home. But when she saw the wrecked car overturned in the ditch, she didn't think, she just acted. She pulled the unconscious man from the wreckage, his expensive suit torn, blood streaking down his face. She called for help, waited for the sirens, and then disappeared before anyone could ask questions. She didn't expect to see him again. She definitely didn't expect him to walk into her diner days later, looking at her like she was the only thing in the room that mattered. "You saved my life," Nicholas Wallace said, his sharp blue eyes locked onto hers. Lily gripped the counter, her heart pounding. "And now," he continued, his voice low and certain, "I'm going to change yours." Lily Hunt had spent most of her life accepting that nothing extraordinary would ever happen to her. She had no grand dreams, no illusions about escaping the small-town life she had been born into. At 24, she worked long shifts at a rundown roadside diner just outside the city, scraping together enough money to keep the lights on in the tiny house she shared with her mother and younger sister. She had learned to live with exhaustion, with the ache in her feet after hours of standing, with the stale scent of coffee and grease clinging to her clothes. That night was supposed to be like any other. The diner had closed late, and after wiping down tables and locking up, Lily climbed into her beat-up car and started the long drive home. The highway was nearly empty, stretching into the darkness with nothing but the occasional flicker of streetlights. She turned up the radio, letting the music fill the silence, her thoughts drifting as she focused on the road ahead. Then she saw it. At first, she thought it was just a reflection in her headlights, a glint of something metallic in the distance. But as she got closer, her breath caught in her throat. A car was flipped over in the ditch, its front end crushed beyond recognition. Smoke curled from the hood, the shattered windshield glistening under the moonlight. Without thinking, Lily pulled over and threw open her door. Her heart pounded as she rushed toward the wreckage, her sneakers slipping on the loose gravel. The closer she got, the stronger the scent of gasoline became, thick and suffocating. The car looked like it had rolled at least twice before coming to a stop. Glass was everywhere, sparkling like tiny diamonds against the pavement. She hesitated for only a second before crouching beside the driver's side, peering through the broken window. A man was slumped over in the seat, his head tilted at an awkward angle. Blood streaked down the side of his face, disappearing into the collar of his torn dress shirt. His chest rose and fell in shallow breaths, a sign that he was still alive. "Hey!" Lily called, reaching through the shattered glass to shake his shoulder. "Can you hear me?" A low groan was her only response. His eyelids fluttered, but he didn't wake. Panic surged through her veins, but she forced herself to focus. She needed to get him out before the situation got worse. Carefully, she reached for his seatbelt, fumbling with the buckle. It was jammed, locked into place, refusing to budge. Come on," she muttered under her breath, yanking at it with all her strength. The man let out another pained sound, his body shifting slightly as she worked. Lily knew she was running out of time. If there was even the smallest chance of a fire starting, she had to get him out now. Bracing herself, she reached both hands into the car and gritted her teeth as she pulled. He was heavy, dead weight against her small frame, but she didn't stop. With a final tug, the seatbelt snapped loose, and she managed to drag him halfway out of the vehicle. His head lolled against her shoulder, a faint breath ghosting against her skin. His face, even bloodied and bruised, was striking, sharp cheekbones, a strong jaw, dark hair matted against his forehead. He smelled of expensive cologne, now mixed with sweat and the metallic scent of blood. Lily ignored the strange feeling curling in her stomach and focused on getting him as far from the car as possible. She dragged him onto the gravel shoulder, gasping as she finally let his weight rest against the ground. Her arms burned from the effort, her legs shaky beneath her. She barely had time to catch her breath before red and blue lights flashed in the distance. Sirens pierced the quiet night, growing louder as emergency vehicles approached. Lily stood up, wiping her hands on her jeans, watching as paramedics rushed toward them. One of them immediately knelt beside the man, checking his pulse and barking orders to his team. "Did you see what happened?" a police officer asked, stepping toward her. Lily shook her head, still breathing heavily. "No, I was driving home and saw the wreck. I pulled him out." The officer studied her for a moment before nodding. "You did the right thing. You might have saved his life." She glanced down at the unconscious man as the paramedics lifted him onto a stretcher. He looked so out of place there, his expensive clothes now torn and dirty, his skin pale beneath the bruises. "Do you know who he is?" she asked before she could stop herself. One of the paramedics looked at her, brows furrowed in confusion. "You don't recognize him?" Lily shook her head. "That's Nicholas Wallace," the paramedic said. "Owner of Wallace Industries." Her stomach dropped. She had just saved the life of a millionaire. And before she could process it, before she could even think of what that meant, the ambulance doors slammed shut, and he was gone. Lily stood there on the side of the road, the distant sound of sirens fading into the night, wondering if she would ever see him again. She had no idea that she would. And that when she did, everything in her life would change. Lily tried to forget about the accident. She told herself it was just a moment, a brief event that had nothing to do with her real life. She had done what any decent person would have done, helped someone in need, and now it was over. Nicholas Wallace was just another stranger she had crossed paths with, and their worlds would never collide again. But no matter how hard she tried to push it from her mind, the memory of that night lingered. She still felt the weight of his body as she had pulled him from the wreckage, the warmth of his breath against her skin, the way his fingers had twitched slightly when she dragged him to safety. She still heard the sirens, saw the way the flashing lights had painted his blood-streaked face in red and blue. She went back to work at the diner the next day, pretending nothing had changed. The customers were the same, truck drivers, late-night travelers, exhausted locals looking for cheap coffee and a quiet place to sit. Her boss, Brenda, barely looked up from the register when Lily walked in. "You're late," Brenda muttered, counting out bills. Lily pulled on her apron and tied it around her waist. "I had a long night." Brenda gave her a skeptical glance but didn't push for details. Lily was grateful for that. The hours dragged on. She poured coffee, wiped down tables, took orders, and forced herself to smile. But there was an unease inside her, a strange sense that something was about to happen. And then, just before midnight, it did. The bell above the diner's door jingled. Lily turned around, expecting to see another trucker or a group of late-night regulars. Instead, a tall man in an expensive suit stepped inside. Nicholas Wallace. Her heart stopped. He was supposed to be in a hospital. He was supposed to be recovering. Yet here he was, standing in the doorway of a dingy diner, looking directly at her. His face was still bruised, a faint cut visible above his eyebrow, but otherwise, he looked nothing like the broken man she had pulled from that wreck. His dark hair was neatly styled, his suit perfectly tailored, and even in this place, he carried himself with an air of effortless authority. Lily felt frozen. He walked toward her, ignoring the curious glances from the other customers. When he reached the counter, he leaned forward slightly, his sharp blue eyes locking onto hers. "You were there that night," he said. His voice was deeper than she expected, smooth and confident. Lily swallowed. "I don't know what you're talking about." One corner of his mouth lifted in a knowing smirk. "You pulled me out of my car." She hesitated. "I just did what anyone else would have done." He tilted his head slightly, studying her. "No. Anyone else would have kept driving." Lily crossed her arms. "Well, congratulations. You found me. What do you want?" Nicholas leaned back slightly, seeming amused by her bluntness. "I wanted to say thank you." "You already did." He let out a short breath, shaking his head. "I was unconscious." "That doesn't count." Lily exhaled, feeling the weight of his gaze. She didn't know what to do with this moment, this strange encounter that felt too surreal to be real. Well, she said finally, you're welcome. Now you can go back to your mansion and pretend none of this ever happened. Nicholas didn't move. You don't like me very much, do you? Lily narrowed her eyes. I don't even know you. But you saved my life, he pointed out. And now you want nothing to do with me? She shrugged. I didn't do it for a reward. Something flickered across his expression, something almost like respect. Good, he said finally. Because I'm not here to offer one. Lily frowned. Then why are you here? Nicholas hesitated for a moment, then said something she never expected. I'm here because I don't forget people who changed my life. The words hung between them, heavy and unspoken. Lily didn't know what to say. She had saved his life. But she hadn't expected him to come back and change hers. Lily couldn't shake the feeling that she had just stepped into something far bigger than she understood. Nicholas Wallace wasn't supposed to be here, standing in front of her like some ghost from a night she had already tried to forget. He wasn't supposed to look at her with those sharp blue eyes, like he was trying to read something in her that she wasn't ready to share. And yet, he was here. The diner around them felt too small, too ordinary for someone like him. The cracked linoleum floors, the smell of burnt coffee, the low hum of the jukebox playing an old country song, it all felt wrong in contrast to the man in the expensive suit who had no business being in a place like this. Lily pulled in a slow breath, trying to steady herself. You don't forget people who change your life, she repeated, crossing her arms. That's a dramatic way to describe what happened. I pulled you out of a car. That's it. Nicholas tilted his head slightly, his expression unreadable. That's not it, he said simply. You saved my life. And you disappeared before I even had a chance to know your name. Lily shifted uncomfortably. It wasn't important. To you, maybe, he said. But I don't believe in coincidences. She narrowed her eyes. What are you trying to say? Nicholas studied her for a moment, then sighed. I spent the last few days wondering why someone like you would risk their life for a stranger and then walk away like it meant nothing. Most people would have stayed. They would have waited for the cameras, the interviews, the chance to be in the spotlight. But you? You disappeared. Lily shrugged. I'm not most people. His lips twitched slightly. No. You're not. She didn't like the way he said it, like he had already decided something about her that she hadn't even figured out herself. A long silence stretched between them. Let me buy you a coffee, he said finally. Lily blinked. What? A coffee, Nicholas repeated. It's the least I can do. She frowned. You realize I work here, right? I can make my own coffee. He smirked. Then take a break and sit with me while you drink it. She hesitated, glancing toward the kitchen. Brenda was watching from behind the counter, pretending to be busy with receipts but obviously eavesdropping. The few customers in the diner were also sneaking glances, their curiosity evident. Nicholas Wallace was not a man who went unnoticed. Lily sighed. Fine. But only for 5 minutes. She grabbed a mug from the counter, poured herself a cup, and slid into the booth across from him. Nicholas leaned back, completely at ease, as if this was something he did every day. You don't seem like the kind of guy who goes around buying coffee for people, Lily said, blowing gently on the steaming liquid. You don't seem like the kind of girl who pulls millionaires out of burning cars, he countered. She smirked. Touché. For a moment, neither of them spoke. You don't seem surprised by who I am, Nicholas noted. Lily shrugged. I didn't know at first. But when the paramedics said your name, I recognized it. He raised an eyebrow. And that didn't change anything? Should it? Nicholas chuckled. Most people would have treated me differently after that. Lily took a sip of her coffee. I'm not most people, remember? His smile faded slightly, and for the first time, there was something almost serious in his gaze. Why did you really leave that night? He asked. Lily exhaled slowly. Because it wasn't my story to be part of. I did what I had to do, and that was enough. Nicholas studied her for a long moment before nodding. You're an interesting person, Lily Hunt. She scoffed. You don't even know me. Not yet, he admitted. But I'd like to. Lily froze slightly, her fingers tightening around the mug. There was something about the way he said it, calm, certain, as if he had already decided that she was someone worth knowing. And for reasons she didn't understand, that scared her more than anything else. Lily had always been good at keeping people at a distance. It was a survival instinct, something she had learned over the years of struggling to get by in a world that had never handed her anything. She didn't trust easily, and she certainly didn't let strangers waltz into her life, especially not ones who had more money than she could even comprehend. But Nicholas Wallace was persistent. After their conversation at the diner, she expected him to disappear back into his world of luxury and power. She thought he would thank her, move on, and forget about the nameless girl who had pulled him out of a wreck. But she had underestimated him. The next evening, as she was wiping down the counter before closing, the door swung open, and there he was again, stepping into the dimly lit diner as if he belonged there. He was dressed more casually this time, no stiff suit, just a dark sweater and tailored pants, but he still looked completely out of place. Lily sighed, setting down the cloth. You do realize this isn't a five-star restaurant, right? You don't have to keep showing up to prove a point. Nicholas smirked, sliding into the same booth as before. Maybe I just like the coffee. She gave him a skeptical look. Yeah, sure. Billionaire tastes and all. He chuckled. All right, maybe not the coffee. But I do enjoy the company. Lily shook her head. You're really not going to let this go, are you? Nicholas leaned back, his expression amused. You intrigue me, Lily. She crossed her arms, narrowing her eyes. Because I don't treat you like some big deal? Because I don't care how much money you have. Partly, he admitted. But mostly because I don't think you're as indifferent as you pretend to be. Lily felt a flicker of something dangerously close to irritation. She wasn't used to being read so easily, and she certainly didn't like the way Nicholas seemed to see right through her walls. She sighed and grabbed a coffee pot, pouring him a cup. Fine. If you're going to sit here and bother me, at least tell me why you keep coming back. Nicholas wrapped his fingers around the cup, watching the steam rise for a moment before answering. I want to know the person who saved my life. Lily rolled her eyes. You make it sound more dramatic than it was. Isn't it? He countered. I would have died that night if you hadn't stopped. I don't take that lightly. Something in his voice made her pause. He wasn't just saying it for effect. He meant it. She shifted her weight, suddenly uncomfortable with the sincerity in his tone. Look, I appreciate that, but I don't need some rich guy following me around trying to repay some imaginary debt. I did what anyone would have done. That's it. Nicholas studied her for a long moment before shaking his head. No. That's not it. And you know it. Lily clenched her jaw. What do you want from me, Nicholas? His gaze didn't waver. I want to understand you. And I think, deep down, you want to understand me too. She exhaled, rubbing a hand over her forehead. I don't have time for this. Nicholas smirked. Then make time. Lily shot him a glare. You really don't take no for an answer, do you? Not when something, or someone, interests me, he admitted. She sighed, shaking her head. You're impossible. And yet, you're still standing here talking to me, he pointed out. Lily groaned, finally giving up. She slid into the seat across from him, crossing her arms. Fine. You want to understand me? Ask your questions. But I get to ask some too. Nicholas looked surprised for a split second, but then a slow smile spread across his lips. Deal. And just like that, Lily realized she had just let him in. A little. But enough to change everything. Lily had no idea how it happened, but somehow Nicholas Wallace had become a part of her routine. He showed up at the diner nearly every night, sometimes ordering coffee, sometimes just sitting in his usual booth, watching as she moved behind the counter. At first, it annoyed her. She didn't like the way he disrupted her life, the way his presence made people whisper, the way he acted like he belonged in a place he clearly didn't. But over time, she stopped minding. Their conversation started as small talk, questions about her day, sarcastic comments about the diner's terrible coffee, light teasing that made her roll her eyes but secretly smile. Then, they became something more. He told her about his life, about growing up in a family where expectations were more important than emotions, about how he had been groomed since childhood to take over the company, about how sometimes he wondered if any of his achievements were really his own or just the product of a path laid out for him before he was even old enough to understand it. Lily listened, surprised by how different his world was from what she had imagined. She had assumed that being rich meant being happy, that having everything meant never feeling lost. But Nicholas had his own burdens, ones that no amount of money could erase. In return, she told him about her own struggles, about her mother, who worked herself to exhaustion to keep them afloat, about her younger sister, who still believed in dreams Lily had long since abandoned, about the feeling of always being one missed paycheck away from losing everything. Nicholas never pitied her. He never made her feel small for what she had been through. Instead, he listened. And somehow, that made all the difference. One evening, after the diner had emptied out and the neon sign outside flickered weakly against the darkness, Nicholas leaned against the counter, watching her clean up. "You ever think about leaving this place?" he asked. Lily glanced up from wiping a table. "You mean the diner?" He shook his head. "I mean all of it. The town. The life you never really chose." She exhaled, setting down the rag. "Of course I have. But wanting something and being able to do it are two different things." Nicholas studied her, his gaze thoughtful. "What if you could?" Lily narrowed her eyes. "What are you getting at?" He hesitated, then said, "Come work for me." She stared at him, stunned. "Excuse me?" Nicholas straightened, as if already prepared for her resistance. "I'm serious. You're smart, resourceful, and you see things differently than the people I'm usually surrounded by. You don't sugarcoat things. I could use someone like that." Lily let out a short laugh. "You think I'm going to drop everything and become, what, your assistant?" He smirked. "I was thinking something more interesting. Maybe something in project management. You pick." She shook her head, crossing her arms. "This is insane. I have no experience in anything corporate. You run a billion-dollar company, and I—" "Saved my life," Nicholas interrupted, his voice calm. "And you're a hell of a lot more capable than you give yourself credit for." Lily felt her stomach tighten. The offer was tempting. Too tempting. But it didn't make sense. "Why are you doing this?" she asked, her voice quieter now. Nicholas held her gaze. "Because you deserve better than this. And because I want to see what you can do when you're given a real chance." Lily swallowed, her thoughts spinning. This was Nicholas Wallace, the man whose life she had saved. The man who had stepped into her world and, against all logic, refused to leave. And now, for the first time in her life, someone was offering her something more than just survival. But the real question was she brave enough to take it? Lily couldn't stop thinking about Nicholas's offer. It played over and over in her mind, filling every quiet moment with a voice that asked, what if she had spent her whole life believing that people like her didn't get second chances? They worked hard, they struggled, they survived. That was it. No one offered them jobs in glass skyscrapers. No one gave them a way out. But Nicholas had. The next night at the diner, he didn't bring it up again. He sat in his usual booth, drinking his terrible coffee, making sarcastic remarks about the radio station playing the same 3 songs on repeat. He acted like nothing had changed. But everything had. Lily could feel the weight of the unspoken question between them. He was giving her space to decide. He wasn't pressuring her. He wasn't pushing. That, more than anything, made her want to say yes. 3 days later, she finally did. It was after her shift, and the diner was empty except for him. She walked up to his booth, crossing her arms. "All right," she said, tilting her head. "Tell me more about this job." Nicholas's lips twitched like he had been expecting this. "What do you want to know?" "I want the truth," she said. "Not some billionaire's charity project. Not a pity offer. If you're just doing this because you feel guilty or because I pulled you out of that car, then forget it." Nicholas leaned forward, resting his elbows on the table. "Lily, let me make one thing very clear. I don't do charity. And I don't waste my time on people who aren't worth it. I'm offering you this job because you have something that my world lacks: perspective. You see things differently. You think differently. And I need people who aren't afraid to call out the flaws in a system that's been running on autopilot for too long." Lily studied him, searching for any sign of deception. "And what exactly would I be doing?" He shrugged. "Learning. Observing. Figuring out where you fit. You'll start at the bottom, just like anyone else, but you won't stay there long if you're as good as I think you are." She hesitated. "And if I say yes?" A slow smirk spread across his lips. "Then I'll have to make sure you don't regret it." Lily let out a breath she hadn't realized she was holding. Every instinct told her to run, to stay in the world she knew, to avoid stepping into something that felt too big, too dangerous. But another part of her, the part that had spent years wishing for something more, told her this was the moment. This was her chance. "Fine," she said, crossing her arms. "I'll do it." Nicholas's smirk widened. "Good choice." Lily exhaled, shaking her head. "I hope so." And just like that, her life changed. She put in her notice at the diner. Brenda didn't understand why she was leaving, and Lily didn't bother trying to explain. It wasn't the kind of thing people in this town would believe anyway. A girl like her didn't just wake up one day and start working for a billionaire. But it was happening. Nicholas arranged everything: the paperwork, the orientation, the first steps into a world she had only ever seen from the outside. Her first day at Wallace Industries was overwhelming. The building was massive, a towering structure of glass and steel that made her feel small the moment she walked through the doors. The employees were polished, dressed in tailored suits and expensive heels, their movements quick and efficient. Lily felt like an outsider the second she stepped into the sleek lobby, her nerves threatening to get the best of her. But then she saw him. Nicholas was waiting near the elevators, dressed in his usual effortless elegance, completely at ease in a world that felt so foreign to her. He met her eyes and smiled. "Ready?" Lily swallowed her nerves and lifted her chin. "As I'll ever be," she said. And with that, she stepped into a future she never thought she'd have. Lily quickly realized that stepping into Nicholas Wallace's world was like being dropped into the middle of a storm. Her first week at Wallace Industries was nothing short of overwhelming. The office was a machine, efficient, fast-paced, and filled with people who had spent years navigating corporate politics. Lily, on the other hand, felt like she had been thrown into the deep end without a life vest. She wasn't given special treatment. Nicholas had made that clear from the start. She started at the bottom, just like anyone else, assisting in various departments, attending meetings she barely understood, and trying to absorb everything like a sponge. She spent hours reading reports, studying financial statements, and figuring out the language of business. And every time she felt like she was drowning, Nicholas was there. He never gave her easy answers. He never coddled her. But he did something no one else had ever done: he challenged her. "Why do you think this project is failing?" he asked one evening when they were reviewing a proposal together. Lily frowned at the document, running her fingers over the edge of the paper. "The numbers are solid, but the execution is weak. It's too ambitious without the right infrastructure to support it." Nicholas nodded. "Go on." She hesitated. They're trying to expand too quickly. The foundation isn't strong enough. They should be focusing on strengthening their existing markets before taking a risk this big. Nicholas smirked. Not bad. Lily rolled her eyes. Don't patronize me. His smirk widened. I'm not. I just like being right about you. She huffed but couldn't stop the small smile that tugged at the corner of her lips. Despite the grueling hours, despite the pressure, she found herself enjoying the work more than she ever expected. It was challenging in a way that no job had ever been before. She had always thought of business as something cold, distant, and untouchable, but Nicholas was teaching her that it was about strategy, about reading people, about knowing when to take risks and when to play it safe. And then there was the problem of Nicholas himself. The more time they spent together, the harder it became to ignore the tension that had started to grow between them. It wasn't just professional. It wasn't just friendly. It was something deeper, something neither of them seemed willing to acknowledge. It was in the way he watched her when he thought she wasn't looking. It was in the way her breath hitched every time he leaned too close during a conversation. It was in the way their arguments never felt like real fights, more like a game they both secretly enjoyed playing. One night, after a particularly long day, Lily found herself in Nicholas's office, reviewing the final details of a contract. It was late, the city lights glowing through the massive windows behind him. The office was quiet, just the two of them and the faint sound of the ticking clock on the wall. You should go home, Nicholas said, glancing up from his desk. Lily scoffed. You should take your own advice. He smirked but didn't argue. Instead, he leaned back in his chair, watching her with that same unreadable expression that always made her stomach twist. Are you happy here? He asked suddenly. Lily blinked, caught off guard. What? Here, he repeated. With this job. With everything. She hesitated, then nodded. Yeah. I think I am. Nicholas's gaze didn't waver. Good. I want you to stay. Something about the way he said it made her pulse quicken. She wasn't sure if he was just talking about the job anymore. Lily swallowed, forcing herself to keep her voice steady. I'm not going anywhere, Nicholas. A slow smile spread across his lips. Good, he said again, softer this time. And for the first time, Lily wondered if she was in more trouble than she had realized. Lily had never been afraid of hard work. She had spent years juggling multiple jobs, pushing herself past exhaustion just to make ends meet. But working at Wallace Industries wasn't just work, it was a battlefield. Every day felt like a test, a constant challenge to prove that she belonged in a world that had never been meant for her. She had learned to navigate corporate meetings, to read between the lines of business deals, to analyze numbers in a way that made sense beyond just profit and loss. But the hardest thing to navigate wasn't the job itself. It was Nicholas. She could no longer ignore the way things had changed between them. What had started as curiosity had turned into something far more complicated. Their late-night conversations, the way they instinctively understood each other, the way his presence had shifted from intimidating to something that felt almost necessary, it was a dangerous game they were playing. And the worst part was that neither of them seemed willing to stop. One evening, after another long day, Lily was in the office, organizing reports when Nicholas appeared in the doorway. He looked tired, the first few buttons of his dress shirt undone, his sleeves rolled up. She had learned that this was how he looked when he let his guard down, when he wasn't Nicholas Wallace, the billionaire CEO, but just Nicholas, the man who carried more weight on his shoulders than he ever admitted. You should take a break, he said, stepping inside. Lily let out a small laugh, shaking her head. That's funny coming from you. He smirked but didn't argue. Instead, he leaned against the desk, watching her. You're different here, he said after a moment. She frowned. Different how? He studied her, as if choosing his words carefully. When I first met you, you were guarded. Tough. Like you didn't want to let anyone in. Lily exhaled, setting down the papers in her hands. That's because I didn't. Nicholas tilted his head. And now? She hesitated. Now? I don't know. Silence stretched between them, thick with something unspoken. You've changed too, she said, meeting his gaze. Nicholas raised an eyebrow. Have I? You don't push people away as much as you used to, she pointed out. You let people see the real you sometimes. Not just the businessman. He let out a slow breath, a small smile playing on his lips. Maybe you're the reason for that. Lily's heart skipped a beat, but she forced herself to keep her expression neutral. You give me too much credit. Or maybe I don't give you enough, Nicholas said quietly. She swallowed, feeling the air shift between them. This wasn't just a working relationship anymore. It hadn't been for a long time. Nicholas reached out, brushing a loose strand of hair from her face, his fingers barely grazing her skin. It was the lightest touch, but it sent a shiver down her spine. You're not just an employee, Lily, he said, his voice softer than she had ever heard it. She inhaled sharply, trying to ignore the way her pulse quickened. Then what am I? His gaze darkened, and for the first time, she saw the answer in his eyes before he even said it. Someone I don't want to lose, he admitted. Lily felt her walls crumble, the ones she had spent years building, the ones that had kept her from believing that someone like him could ever mean those words. But Nicholas Wallace had never lied to her. And for the first time, she didn't want to run. Not from him. Not from this. Not anymore. This story isn't just about fate or a chance encounter that changes everything. It's about two people from completely different worlds who never should have crossed paths, yet somehow did. Lily starts as someone who believes life has already decided her place, stuck in a cycle of survival, never expecting more, never daring to dream beyond what she's been given. Nicholas, on the other hand, has always had everything, but for all his wealth and success, he's just as trapped as she is, bound by expectations, by a life he didn't entirely choose. What makes this story powerful is not just the romance but the transformation. It's not about Nicholas saving Lily with his money, nor is it about Lily humbling Nicholas with her resilience. It's about two people pushing each other to be more than what they thought they could be. Lily's growth is inspiring because she doesn't just take an opportunity, she earns her place in a world that was never meant for her. And Nicholas's journey is just as compelling because he realizes that true power isn't in wealth but in choosing who you become, regardless of what the world expects. The ending is satisfying not just because they fall in love but because they choose each other, not out of obligation, not because of circumstance, but because they see each other fully, flaws and all. It's a story about how sometimes, the person you save ends up saving you right back.